Hello, East Providence, and welcome to the Pulse of East Providence with Mayor Bob DaSilva. Our administration tries to make as many ways to communicate to the public as possible. We utilize social media, we use our website, eastprovinceri.gov. You can always sign up for our newsletter that gets sent out on a regular basis with the latest information. And we also use this program as a way to inform our community about some of the great things happening across the state and also impacting our community. Today, we are very fortunate to have an incredible guest who has a wealth of knowledge, not only in the way of commerce, but also with the housing crisis and some of the housing programs that are going on here in Rhode Island, in East Providence, and also across the nation. Welcome to the show, Stefan Pryor.
Really appreciate it, Mayor DaSilva. Great to be with you.
Well, thank you for being here. Look, I always like to start off my show by having people explain a little bit about themselves. Like, tell the community who Stefan Pryor is, how did you, where are you from? Give us a little background on you.
Love it. Happy to do it. First of all, Mayor, really appreciate that you do this show. Thanks for having me, and great to collaborate with you on so many fronts. Mayor, Governor Raimondo brought me to Rhode Island. It's about, it's 8 years ago, going on 9 years, that she brought me to Rhode Island to be Commerce Secretary. Our state, Rhode Island, did not have an umbrella to do the work around the economy, to do the economic development activity. And the General Assembly created the position of the Commerce Secretary. Governor Raimondo was the first to recruit for it. Quite frankly, then Majority Leader Shekarshi played a big role in recruiting me too. He will tell you himself. And they teamed up and brought me. And we had at that time, we had the highest unemployment rate in America. Back in 2015, we had the worst unemployment rate in the whole country. And we ended up in the Raimondo years, working with the General Assembly, working with municipal leaders. We saw the biggest drop, or one of them, in the entire country in unemployment, one of the biggest decreases in the whole country, one of the biggest success stories. Then COVID hit, and all those things happened that really either shut down or restricted in some form economies across the whole world.
Right.
And working with first Governor Raimondo and then very much with Governor McKee coming out of the COVID period, I was still Commerce Secretary, working across the two governors, working with municipal leaders, working with business leaders, working with labor. We kept big chunks of the economy open through that whole COVID crisis, and Moody's Analytics studied the states, and Moody's ranked the states on the strength of their recovery. And in those key months coming out of COVID, Rhode Island had the strongest recovery in the Northeast and one of the best in the whole country, like in the top handful of states for strength of our recovery coming out of COVID. So what I mean to say is we've come a long way, and this has been a big concerted effort, not just that of the Commerce Secretary's office. Now I'm very, very proud to be back and working in this new capacity with a brand new department, the housing department. And just to answer another part of your question very, very quickly, I'm originally from downstate New York. That's where I'm originally from. Now I am from here.
That's right.
Rhode Island.
That's
and
right.
You and I see each other all over the place. You know I'm very passionate about this place. This is my home, and this is my home forever. And my parents were public school teachers.
Okay.
And so public service is in the blood and in the culture of my family. And I'm not sure they expected me to be in public service permanently, but I love it. And I'm very fortunate to serve great governors who are helping to get the job done and to work with great municipal leaders, quite frankly.
I got to say, I've had the experience of working you not only through the pandemic, and you helped not only our municipality get through that successfully, but we also worked with you very closely on the South Quay project.
Yes.
And we spent, and here's the thing that people don't see behind the scenes, right, is the number of interactions and meetings and conversations that are happening to get a project off the ground, to get a project funded. And you were instrumental in getting us that first $35 million earmarked for this incredible project.
Proud of it, working with you, Mayor.
You want to talk about that project for a second? I think
Absolutely.
that's a great project for the state and for East Providence.
I'm happy to. Well, big credit and kudos to you, Mayor, because you've been a stalwart supporter of this, and you see it because you have the vision, and so does Governor McKee. So we are one of the centers in the country for offshore wind, Rhode Island. We helped to give birth to the industry in the United States. We still have the first and the only operational array of offshore turbines in the whole country. Now, we got to fix that. More parts of the eastern seaboard and then the Gulf Coast and then the West Coast need to get in on the act. But we are the pioneering state, Rhode Island, the ocean state. And we have companies that have co-located here or altogether located here in the wind industry. And where I'm going with this is we need a new seaport. So to explain further, we have something like 30 entrepreneurs and small companies or outposts of companies related to offshore wind in the incubator in the jewelry district of Providence. That these are offshore wind related companies extraordinarily close to East Providence in our capital city making it happen. We have the co-headquarters of Ørsted, the global leader, it can be argued, for offshore wind, the developer of major offshore wind projects across the globe. So where I'm going with all of this is we have a lot of potential, but to fulfill that potential, you need to have access to the water, you need to be able to bring big items, big chunks of the turbines and related infrastructure inshore in order to push it back out and to get it, to assemble it and to bring it back out and finish assembling it in the water, not just for Rhode Island, where we have big new procurements underway.
Right.
We do. We have a 400 megawatt procurement with 50 turbines. Right now we only have 5 in the water. 50 turbines in what they call Revolution Wind. Connecticut has a whole bunch too. Those are coming close to approval. And then there's the Massachusetts and the Long Island and beyond. We could be a key center for that. So where I'm going in response to your question is, South Quay could complement Provport, which is so close by, and Quonset, which is not far, could complement it and be a brand new seaport to serve that growing industry. We need it, and that's why that $35 million made sense, and why we got to keep pushing and try to make that port happen. And it could be an economic engine for East Providence.
No, yeah, I agree with you 100%. Not only an economic engine for East Providence, but for the entire state and the region, as you mentioned. But here's something that's kind of cool.
Yes.
Not only were you selected by one governor to be Secretary of Commerce, which is an honor, you know, to be recruited to a state,
real honor.
To be recruited to a state to lead a new department.
Yes.
It's pretty impressive. That's kudos to you.
Well,
you know, they liked your resume.
Somehow
but then,
or other, the governor's had such judgment. I don't know how.
But then, to have a completely different governor select you for once again a brand new Secretary of Housing position.
Yes.
Can you talk about that position and what that means?
Absolutely, Mayor. And here again, it's been a delight to work with you already on these projects and developments for housing. So we have a challenge in Rhode Island where we have in fact, we have the worst housing production rate in the country right now. Similar to when we had the highest unemployment rate. A dubious distinction once again. But we know that Rhode Island we're a manageably sized state, we are the finest state, we can get ourselves out of this. We have, on a per capita basis, the worst percentage of housing starts in the United States. Why? We have some zoning, planning, and development processes that need to be clarified and made more predictable at the local level. We've underinvested at the state level, Mayor, where in New England, other than New Hampshire, which is not a housing-focused, investor-oriented state, other than New Hampshire, we had the lowest in New England rate of investing public money in housing production. So there's a whole range of reasons. One of the things the General Assembly saw fit to do was create a housing secretary that could lead, that could coordinate, that could work with developers, nonprofit and for-profit, and could work with cities and towns to get the job done. And now we're also investing more dollars. Now that the General Assembly and Governor McKee have seen that we have a structure with a secretariat, with a growing department, brand new and growing, now we can pour some money in and know that it's going to get deployed, and there'll be coordination with cities and towns like East Providence. So we've seen fit as a state to put $250 million into housing out of the American Rescue Plan. And just in this legislative session, we followed up with $100 million more of investment. Now, that will not solve our total problem, but it is a very, very strong start, and that's what the Secretariat's going to help us do.
Listen, I'm excited to have worked with you, not only both in the first capacity as Commerce Secretary, now working with you very closely as Housing Secretary, because we have some really impressive projects happening here. We'll talk about those a little bit later.
Yes.
But talk about some of the supports to municipalities. I heard a little bit about the Municipal Fellowship or the Municipal Fellows Program, $1.4 million. Explain that.
This is very important. So one of the things that your fellow municipal leaders and yourself helped to describe to us through the League of Cities and Towns here in Rhode Island was that there are some real barriers to getting housing done. There are plenty of willing mayors. You've proven yourself to be. You know, whether it's, I made myself a little list, whether it's Riverside Square, Sutton Place, Ivy Place, East Point, Parkway Towers, Rumford Towers. There are a variety of investments that we've already made together in East Providence to get housing going. We've been at groundbreakings and ribbon cuttings together on housing. Even when I was Commerce Secretary, now when I'm Housing Secretary, you're one of the mayors who gets it. Many mayors get it, and town managers too. And what they're trying to do is find stretches of land that would be good for housing. They know their communities best, but what are the barriers? One of them is capacity within the staff of the town or city. They only have a shared planner with other cities and towns based upon the expense and even just tradition. They have no development staff. What can the state do? We've said to ourselves, what if we created a program of municipal fellows, and a fellow or a staff member could be deployed and co-funded with a town so we can share the burden or just the responsibility and the cost of having a new planner or a new development professional on staff. So we're creating that program. The General Assembly funded that. We're working cooperatively with the League of Cities and Towns, and we're going to have an application process where cities and towns can say, I need that additional staff person. I want to build housing. I'll deploy this person to do it. And then the second thing, infrastructure. One of the other things that we've heard through the League, through cities like East Providence and other places is, we need that last mile of infrastructure, a roadway connection, a water sewer system connection, or just another utility to get hooked up to make a tract of land activated for housing development. Now we have a $4 million fund that's going to run through the infrastructure bank. Just proposed it during this budget season with Governor McKee as a budget amendment. The General Assembly approved it. We're off to the races.
Fantastic. And I know there's also support for municipalities who want to provide services to people who are facing homelessness. There's some money set aside for that. Can you talk about that for a little bit?
Absolutely. Mayor DaSilva, thank you for the opportunity to do so. We have something called the Consolidated Homelessness Fund, and that CHF process is out to cities and towns, it's out to homeless service providers, it's out to anyone who might want to get in on the act. We know we do have increased numbers of unsheltered brothers and sisters, Rhode Islanders, who are out there and homeless at the moment. We have hundreds of fellow Rhode Islanders who are without shelter right now. We know it to be true. Now, we've been standing up more shelters and warming centers during the winter where we can help folks come indoors. So we've been doing better and opening up more spots for folks, more roofs for folks to come under, but we need more still. So we have some $9 million out through this Consolidated Homeless Fund process. We have two deadlines, August 3rd and August 31st. August 3rd is coming up quick for any purpose at all that could prevent or address homelessness. And then at the end of August, there's another deadline which I want to highlight for new shelter or expanded shelter or center, warming center activities and operations. So if there are folks who are hearing this show who say, I know a good spot for that. I know that this would be a welcoming place for folks who are experiencing homelessness. I know that this would be a good property that's not being used right now. I know that it's, frankly, it makes sense for our community, and it's better than having folks unsheltered right here in our city or town. That's what the opportunity is. We want to make sure that we create win-win-win for everyone. We want to bring folks in from outdoors. We want to make sure that we prevent any other problems that could occur with folks being without a roof over their heads.
Now, the other thing too that's important, a lot of times you hear people in the community who don't really understand the process of how affordable housing happens. They think that a developer who is investing their own money is going to somehow create affordable housing. It needs to work financially for them, right?
It does.
And so we did put some funds aside to help create more low-income housing. And one of the programs you have is a state tax credit of $30 million. How does that work?
I'm so glad you mentioned that, Mayor. So this is brand new. So we've worked on these developments that I mentioned even without this tool. Now we're going to be able to do even more together, and I know you have some projects in the pipeline. So the Fed's workhorse program for producing affordable housing is called the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit. It is a tax credit that lets you essentially invest in housing developments to write the rents down, to keep the prices lower for lower and moderate income Rhode Islanders. So there's a 4% variety and a 9% variety of low-income housing tax credits, or what they call LIHTC. Most states in the Northeast, in fact, all but New Hampshire and Rhode Island, had a LIHTC state companion tax credit to invest in those developments, fill the budget gaps, keep the prices low, and get these projects built. But Rhode Island and New Hampshire did not have them. Well, now it's only New Hampshire, because we went to the legislative session this past session, and in June, the General Assembly, thanks to Speaker Shekarchi, thanks to Senate President Ruggiero, thanks to Governor McKee, passed a $30 million allocation per year through our new state low-income housing tax credit. So we'll be able to co-invest in a project and pull down those federal tax credits that we otherwise may or might leave on the table.
Right.
They just might not go anywhere. They're allocated to Rhode Island, but we can't even draw them because the projects don't have budgets that are fulfilled, that are complete, and able to use them. So now we'll have this tax credit that'll help us get the job done.
And you know, it's so important. I'm glad you're talking about all these different, because we have some more projects and funding opportunities available.
Yes.
Because developers need to know that this is out there, and that your office now will be leading this and directing it and making sure the money gets out the door.
Yes.
The other thing, the Priority Projects Fund,
Yes.
$27 million.
Yes.
What's that?
That's very important. That is a new fund out of the American Rescue Plan. There's something called the State Fiscal Recovery Fund subcomponent of the American Rescue Plan dollars for Rhode Island. And we discussed with the Speaker, the Senate President, through the proposal of the Governor, the idea of having a special fund at this moment in time where the housing challenges are so great, where we're coming from so far behind, worst production rate in the country, and where there are promising projects. I know you have some right here in East Providence that you've brought to us, that you've said, hey, we have got some projects we can get done. And frankly, you've been among the mayors who've been really articulate and really persuasive on this. The quicker we can authorize the projects and fill the gaps, the faster you can get in the ground, and you know you can get dozens, even hundreds of units built. You've said this to us, Mayor DaSilva. So we created this fund. It's going to be an open and competitive process, a fair process for all cities and towns, for all their developers to apply. But as a matter of fact, we went into the General Assembly session with a $17 million proposal, thinking that was ambitious. The General Assembly said, we like your idea so much, how about 10 million more? It's 27 million.
Fantastic.
Now, that'll go fast still,
Yeah,
but
well.
it's even more, and it is fantastic. You are absolutely right to call it that. And we're going to have an open competitive process. In the fall, there'll be an application that is probably, not determined yet, but probably synchronized with some of the other major programs like those low-income housing tax credits, so that it's easy for a developer to apply and get an answer on multiple fronts and get approved and go.
That's fantastic. It really is fantastic. I mean, I know one of the projects here in the city will probably be applying for that, maybe a couple of them. One Neighborhood Builders is partnering with 3 other entities
Yes.
to create what they're calling the City Center Project on
Yes.
Taunton Avenue.
Yes.
It's a really innovative project because it targets multiple different populations, okay? Kids coming out of foster care, people dealing with domestic violence issues, people who are transitioning from homelessness into being housed. So we're very excited about that project, and I'm just going to put a plug in for them when they come before you. When they come before you asking for some funding, we'd love to see them get some funding for that.
You and they have made a very good case, and so have a number of developers, and there are probably some that we haven't even heard from yet. But I give you kudos for making the case. And now we have yet another fund where such a project can be eligible. Certainly no guarantees. Everyone will be on equal footing. But thank you for making the case.
I put my plug on the record.
You did.
all right?
You did.
So let's talk about transit-oriented development projects. What's that all about?
So that's another really promising opportunity for us. So one of the things that people sometimes ask is, well, where can we build housing in Rhode Island? We know there's a problem. Everyone up and down the income ladder, Mayor, is saying that they can't find housing at the price they're accustomed to. Everyone, it's not just folks at the most affordable levels. Everyone's saying it. We've got to build more housing. Where can we do it? Where can we build out enough units at great enough density that it'll make a difference? And one of the answers to that is next to a train station, next to a major bus stop, where the infrastructure is there. You don't even have to build out as much parking for cars, because people can take public transit. And often around, let's say, a train station, there's also already built water and sewer and roadways because the traffic already exists. It can take the additional capacity. It's a great place to build new housing. So what we've said to ourselves, and Speaker Shekarchi has yet again been an eloquent leader on this, we can build transit-oriented development, new housing stock around these train stations and other transit nodes. So we now have $4 million, additional American Rescue Plan dollars, that'll be in yet another fund for this purpose, and also likely in the fall, we'll put out an application where developers can apply and say, I'm ready. Also, we have a process that we're going to undertake with cities and towns through legislation that the General Assembly passed, where we can help a mayor, help a town manager, help your overall city upzone to create more opportunity and more permission to develop in a denser way around a transit node.
You know, and I think that's one of the important things that we've been able to achieve here in East Providence over the last 4 years, is we've changed some of our overlay districts to allow for more different developments, and also to make it more financially feasible for a person who's going to come in and invest money. We've got some great projects going along. So they're not affordable housing projects, but it's adding to the housing market.
That's important.
Which gives people opportunities,
yes,
and maybe frees up a single family home, because now I'm downsizing into an apartment, you know?
It does. We need all of the above. You just described a project that serves vulnerable Rhode Islanders, and that's what the Priority Projects Fund is aimed at. The Transportation-Oriented Development Fund recognizes that some of these units should be affordable. We hope so. But we also need new market rate units. We need to open up more housing opportunities across the whole state.
I couldn't agree with you more. Now, let's talk about this homelessness infrastructure, $30 million.
Yes.
What's that all about?
Okay, that is a point of emphasis with great justification by our Governor, Dan McKee. One of the things that he said to us is, housing department, state of Rhode Island as a whole, we need to own and lease more properties to get our homelessness challenges under control. So that $30 million program will enable us to buy a property where, for example, in Providence, this happens to be, once again, in the capital city, we are in negotiations, we're being public about it, with the former Charles Gate Nursing Home, that separately from housing department's interest and inquiry altogether was coming out of commission, was de-operationalizing itself, shutting it down. So after that, we came in and said, well, we could utilize this property. So we're already leasing a piece of it for Amos House, which helps homeless folks. And we're considering it and negotiating for an acquisition of that property. So we're going to use the Homelessness Infrastructure Fund for purposes like that, especially in concert with city and town leaders. Again, you know best where is good and where is not optimal to locate centers for our most vulnerable Rhode Islanders. And we know it's much better for folks to be indoors. How do we control properties? How do we make a safe environment for the families themselves, for the individuals themselves, and for the community?
Well, I think that's one. That sounds like a great use of Charles Gate, and
Yes.
I'm glad to see that you guys are moving in that direction. Now, one of the things we talked about briefly was how we've changed zoning laws to make it more desirable
Yes.
and more feasible for people to come in and construct, properties. Speaker Shekarchi was a champion on changing some very important legislation and changing zoning. 13 out of his 14 bills got the green light. Talk about some of that.
Absolutely. The big theme across them is that we need to help localities, many of which are looking to do more housing, create more efficient and predictable processes. So one of the things that the Speaker's office did is, and through its interrelationships and partnerships with its various representatives across the whole state, state reps teamed up and said, do we need this third layer of appeal within our process? If a town has decided this is good, or has decided to decline a project, do we need 3 bites at the apple here? So in one instance, they eliminated an appeals board called the SHAB. They said, we don't need this. The next appeal can be straight to the courts. Just being a little bit more efficient about what we're already doing. So we either get it done or don't and move on, things like that. So it's 13 or so instances of that, cleaning up the process to make it make more sense for everyone involved, for the town, for the community, for the developer. Also, I will note, one of those bills does contain some guidance for and some fuel for the transit-oriented development work that we just talked about. So it's in there too.
Excellent. Listen, it was much needed, and I'm glad that we got that going. Consolidated Homeless Fund currently seeking proposals for $9.4 million. What is that?
Okay, so that is, I was referring to that earlier, and I'm so glad for the second chance to really emphasize that. We have over $9 million on the street right now for a provider, a homeless provider, or frankly, a social service agency, Mayor, I didn't have the chance to say this, that might not yet be in the business of serving folks who are experiencing homelessness, but might say, you know, I can help. I know our homelessness numbers are up. By the way, Mayor, homelessness numbers are up in a lot of places in the United States. This is not unique to Rhode Island, but we care about Rhode Islanders first and foremost, and we want to make sure we provide a roof and a home for Rhode Islanders who are seeking it, families with children, couples, individuals. So this enables folks to step up, meaning providers, real estate owners and holders, towns, and say to us, here's where this should happen.
Well, besides creating this new secretary position, they also, which I was very happy to see,
Yes.
the General Assembly funded 21 positions in
Yes,
your
they
office.
did.
Talk about those positions and what are you going to be looking for?
So glad for the chance to do that. So the housing department, as you've already indicated, Mayor, is brand new. We didn't have one as a state before. We've got to ramp up. So Governor McKee proposed and the General Assembly approved 21 positions. These are going to help us form, it'll still be one of the smallest agencies in government, but it'll finally have some of the capacity that we really, really do need to take on these problems and set up these programs and operate them and be equal to the task or closer to equal to the task. So we already have 5 positions that have just been posted in recent days. So this program is perfectly timed that you and I are on right now. 5 positions include 3 positions related to homelessness, professional positions that will give folks the opportunity to help our fellow most vulnerable Rhode Islanders. There's a chief of staff position, Mayor, that's one of the additional positions that's aimed at coordinating across our whole new department and coordinating in an interdepartmental way with other departments in government, health and human services, also with cities and towns, to get the job done on housing, on every aspect of housing, market rate, affordable, and the issue of homelessness. So if you're listening right now and you think, I'd like to pitch in, I have some experience, I have some expertise, I have some know-how, I just have some interest and willingness. If you're out there, Rhode Islanders, and you're interested in these positions, please check out the state's website where all the personnel positions are listed and apply. And those are just the first 5. We're going to go on and we'll post all 21. And there's one additional thing I want to say. Rhode Island Housing is a separate agency from the Department of Housing that we're establishing. Rhode Island Housing, the Housing Finance Authority of the state. I happen to, thanks to Governor McKee, also serve as chair of that board at Rhode Island Housing. Working with Carol Ventura, the chief executive there, we are forming another entity that will carry out this work, a subsidiary of Rhode Island Housing that's going to be a proactive development organization that will reach out and acquire properties, assemble properties, help to figure out where in the capital stack, where in the budget there are holes so we can get more projects done. We're going to hire a head of that new subsidiary and some staff over there too. So Rhode Islanders, please stay tuned. There are a bunch of new professional opportunities of jobs in helping to remedy our housing challenges and our homelessness challenges.
Excellent. Well, East Providence, we've just spent a half hour learning about some of the housing initiatives going on in the state of Rhode Island that also will impact East Providence. Stefan Pryor, thank you for being my guest.
Thank you, Mayor DaSilva.
We'll see you out there. It's been the Pulse of East Providence with Mayor Bob DaSilva. Take care.